nummy. They thought I was in a shelter somewhere, too broken to fight back. They didn't know I had spent 11 months building a case that would end them. I sat in my car in the parking lot of my own condo building, engine off, breath fogging the windshield. It was -18 outside, the kind of February cold that settles into your bones and stays there. I had a thermos of Tim Hortons double-double going cold in the cuff holder and my laptop open on the passenger seat, streaming live footage from the 4 cameras I had installed in my own unit 3 weeks ago. On the screen, my brother's wife was walking through my living room in my bathrobe. My bathrobe, the one my grandmother had given me before she passed. I had not been inside that condo in 4 months. My name is still on the title. Let me back up. I bought the unit on the 22nd floor of a building in downtown Ottawa when I was 28. I am a senior compliance analyst at a mid-sized financial services firm. I had saved for 6 years, put down 18%, and signed the mortgage myself. It was the first real thing I had ever owned. My brother, who was 7 years older than me, had been between jobs for most of those 6 years. He had a talent for starting things and abandoning them. A landscaping business. A franchise attempt that collapsed after 8 months. A real estate course he never finished. He always had a reason. The economy. His business partner. Bad timing. When I bought the unit, he was the first person I called. He showed up with a bottle of Prosecco and a hug and said he was proud of me. I believed him. The problem started small, the way it always does. He asked if he could crash in my place for 2 weeks, while his landlord did emergency repairs on his rental. I said yes. 2 weeks became 6. 6 weeks became 3 months. I told myself it was fine. He was my brother. He helped with groceries sometimes. He kept the place reasonably clean. I told myself I was being generous. What I did not know was that he had already started telling people it was his place. I found out by accident. A coworker mentioned she had seen an Airbnb listing for a condo that looked exactly like mine. Same view, same kitchen backsplash, same crack in the bathroom tile I had been meaning to fix. I pulled it up on my phone in the office kitchen and stood there reading his listing while my coffee went cold. Entire condo, sleeps 4, downtown Ottawa, walking distance to Parliament Hill. Available year-round. He had over 40 reviews. He had been doing it for 8 months. He was charging $220 a night. I did the math on my lunch break. At 60% occupancy, which was conservative given the reviews, he had collected somewhere between $30,000 and $40,000 from my condo while I was living in a 1-bedroom rental in Canada, paying rent out of pocket because he had told me the building had a mold issue and it was unsafe for me to live there while remediation happened. There was no mold. I had hired an inspector. There was nothing wrong with my building at all. He had moved me out of my own home so he could rent it to strangers. I did not confront him. Not yet. I am a compliance analyst. I do not act on emotion. I act on documentation. I called my lawyer the same afternoon. Then I called a private investigator who specializes in property fraud. Then I opened a new spreadsheet and started building what I came to think of as the file. Every Airbnb review, dated and saved. Screenshots of the listing with the geolocation data still embedded. Bank records I had quietly requested, showing deposits into his account that aligned with booking dates. A paper trail of text messages where he had told me the building was uninhabitable. The letter from the inspector confirming there was no mold and never had been. I also, very quietly, reached out to the Canada Revenue Agency tip line. If he had collected $40,000 in rental income and not declared a single dollar, that was their problem too. Then I waited. I gave him time to keep going. Every additional booking was another entry in the file. My lawyer said the longer the paper trail, the stronger the case, so I watched. I documented. I said nothing. I also had a locksmith make me a new set of keys. The smart lock I had installed on my front door 3 weeks ago was paired to an app on my phone. I could lock or unlock it from anywhere. I had told my brother I was upgrading the security system for insurance purposes. He had nodded and not asked a single question, which told me everything I needed to know about how comfortable he had gotten. The night I chose was a Friday in February. He had a booking for the entire long weekend. Family of 4 from Toronto, here for a hockey tournament. Check-in had been at 4 in the afternoon. I knew because I was watching. From the parking lot, in my car. With my thermos and my laptop and 11 months of patience, at 9:15 in the evening I opened the app. I watched the little padlock icon on my screen flip from open to closed. Then I called the Ottawa Police non-emergency line. I told them I was the registered owner of a condo unit in my building and that I had reason to believe unauthorized individuals were occupying my property without my knowledge or consent. I gave them the address and my unit number. I told them I was in the parking lot and could come up immediately to provide documentation. The dispatcher told me a constable would meet me in the lobby within 20 minutes. I closed the laptop and got out of the car. The lobby was warm and smelled like the cedar diffuser the building manager kept at the front desk. I showed the concierge my identification and my ownership documents. He had been there for 3 years. He knew my face. He also knew my brother's face, and he confirmed, without me even asking, that the gentleman in 2230 had been telling guests the condo belonged to his family. The constable arrived at 9:40, young, professional, clipboard. I handed her the printed ownership summary my lawyer had prepared. Title deed, my name, my mortgage number, the property assessment notice from the City of Ottawa also in my name. She looked at all of it, asked me 2 clarifying questions, and then called for a second officer. We went upstairs together. My brother answered the door in a Leafs hoodie with a beer in his hand. The family from Toronto was visible behind him in the living room, 4 of them, kids included, watching the hockey game on my television. He looked at the officers. Then he looked at me. Something crossed his face that I had never seen there before. It was not guilt exactly, it was calculation. He was already working out his story. Hey, he said, and he actually smiled. What's going on? Is everything okay? Sir, the constable said, we have a report from the registered property owner that this unit is being occupied without authorization. Can you tell me your name and your relationship to this property? He said his name, and then he said something that made my stomach turn even though I had been expecting it. He said it was a family property. He said our parents had always intended for him to take over the management of it. He said I had agreed to let him handle the rental income while I got back on my feet. Get back on my feet, as if I had been the one struggling. I did not say a word. I let him finish. My lawyer had told me to let him build the story in front of witnesses before I dismantled it. Do you have anything in writing? The constable asked. A lease agreement? A property management authorization? He said yes. He said he had paperwork. He went to the kitchen drawer, the one next to the stove where I used to keep takeout menus, and he pulled out a document that he handed to the officer with the confidence of a man who believes a piece of paper can solve anything. I looked at it from where I was standing. It was a property management authorization letter, signed with my name, dated 14 months ago. It looked professional. It had a signature block and everything. The constable read it. She looked at me. I have never seen that document before, I said. That is not my signature. My brother started to say something. I opened my bag. I had prepared for this specific moment. I pulled out the folder my lawyer had labeled Exhibit B and handed it to the constable. Inside was a forensic document analysis I had commissioned 6 weeks ago. As soon as my lawyer had warned me he would likely produce something exactly like this. A certified forensic document examiner in Toronto had compared the signature on that letter to a decade of my actual signatures on file. Tax returns, mortgage documents, employment contracts. The analysis was 12 pages long and its conclusion was unambiguous. The signature on his authorization letter did not match any verified sample of my handwriting. The letter had also been printed on a laser printer, and the embedded metadata, visible with the right software, showed the document had been created 4 weeks ago, not 14 months ago. 4 weeks ago, I said, looking at my brother. You printed that 4 weeks ago. I can show you the metadata if you want. The constable looked at the document again. Then she looked at my brother. His smile was gone. The family from Toronto had gone very quiet in the living room. This is the part I want people to understand, because it is the part nobody talks about. When someone in your family does something like this, you do not feel triumphant in the moment. You feel a specific kind of grief that does not have a name. I was looking at my brother, who used to carry me on his shoulders when I was 5, who drove me to my first job interview, who cried at my convocation, and I was watching him lie to a police officer in the home he had stolen from me. There was no satisfaction. There was just this cold, clear sadness, and underneath it, something harder. I had chosen to protect myself. That was enough. The constable asked my brother to step into the hallway. Her partner stayed with me and the family in the living room. I apologized to the family from Toronto. They were not in trouble. They had booked through a legitimate-looking platform and had no reason to suspect anything was wrong. The mother asked me what was going to happen. I told her I would not be pressing any charges against them and that I was sorry their weekend had been disrupted. She looked at her kids and then back at me and said, quietly, that she hoped I was okay. I said I would be. In the hallway, the constable was taking my brother's statement. I could not hear the words, but I could hear the tone, and his tone kept shifting from confident to defensive, to something that sounded increasingly like a man realizing the walls have no exits. What he did not know was that the Airbnb fraud was only part of it. I had submitted a CRA tip 3 months earlier. An auditor had already contacted me twice. I had provided them with every booking record I had collected, every deposit amount, every date. The investigation was already open. That was not something that would happen tonight. That was something that would happen over the next several months, quietly and bureaucratically, the way CRA always works. But it was in motion. There was also the matter of the income he had been collecting while simultaneously receiving employment insurance. He had filed for EI twice during the period he was operating the Airbnb. Collecting government benefits while running an undeclared cash operation is not a gray area in Canada. It is fraud. That referral had gone to Service Canada 2 months ago. The constable came back inside. She told my brother that she was not able to force him out of the unit tonight on a civil matter, but that the fraudulent document changed things considerably. She told him she was recommending he speak to a lawyer. She also told him that if the registered owner asked him to leave the property and he refused, that became criminal trespass, not a civil issue. She looked at me. I looked at my brother. I'm asking you to leave, I said, tonight. He stared at me for a long moment. I had been waiting for something, some acknowledgement, some crack in the surface where the brother I used to know might show through. There was nothing. Just a man calculating his options. He picked up his jacket from the hook by the door. My hook, in my entryway, in my home. He walked past me without saying anything. At the door, he stopped with his back to me. Mom is going to hear about this, he said. She already has, I said. I called her this morning. He left. I stood in the doorway until the elevator closed. Then I went back inside and sat down on the couch. The family from Toronto was gathering their things as quietly as possible. The kids looked confused. The father shook my hand on the way out and said good luck. The mother paused at the door and looked at me one more time, and I could see she wanted to say something. She said, "You did the right thing." Then they were gone too. The condo was quiet. I want to tell you that I called my mother because I wanted her to know before it happened, not after. She had not known about the Airbnb. I believe that. But she had known he was living in my unit and she had not asked questions. And I think part of her had been relieved that the family problem had organized itself into a solution she did not have to think about. When I told her what I had found, she was silent for a very long time. Then she asked if I was sure. Then she cried. Then she said she was sorry. It was the first time she had said that to me in years. About anything. The legal process took 8 months. The civil suit for unpaid rent and property damages was settled out of court for $31,000, which was approximately what my lawyer calculated he had collected in documented Airbnb income during the period I had records for. My brother liquidated his truck and borrowed the rest from our uncle, which is a problem that now belongs to them. The CRA assessment came in 5 months later. The Service Canada investigation is still technically ongoing as of the last time I checked, though I try not to check. That part of the story is no longer mine to carry. I had the locks changed the morning after he left, not the smart lock, a physical deadbolt keyed to a single set of keys that only I hold. I had the condo professionally cleaned. I bought a new bathrobe. Some people, when they hear this story, ask why I did not just confront him the moment I found the Airbnb listing. They ask why I waited almost a year. They ask why I moved out of my own condo instead of forcing the issue sooner. The answer is the same thing I tell junior analysts when they are new to the job. Evidence is not about being right. Everyone involved in a fraud case thinks they are right. Evidence is about being able to prove what happened in a room in front of people who did not see it. If I had confronted him in the spring, he would have deleted the listing, manufactured a story, and made it a family argument. He would have called it a misunderstanding. He would have told our mother I had become paranoid and difficult. And maybe she would have believed him because she had been believing easier stories about both of us for most of our lives. Instead, I waited. I built the file. I let him run the operation long enough to produce a 40-review paper trail and a forged document, both of which he walked into a police investigation carrying voluntarily like a gift. That is the thing about people who take without asking. They get comfortable, and comfort makes them sloppy. I am sitting in my living room right now. It is late. The city lights are reflecting off the Ottawa River and the ice is starting to break up, which means spring is coming, which means I have lived in this condo for another full year. The mortgage payment came out of my account this morning, same as it has every month for 4 years, and it went towards something that belongs to me, which is not something I take for granted the way I used to. My brother and I have not spoken since that night. I do not know if we ever will. That door is not closed, but it is not open either. It is the kind of door you leave in place so you can decide later when you are not still standing in the hallway. My mother calls on Sundays. It is different now. She asks about my work. She asks about the condo. Last month she asked if I needed anything. I told her I had everything I needed. I meant it. There is a version of this story where I confront my brother the moment I find the listing, and it turns into a screaming match at a family dinner that resolves nothing. I have thought about that version a lot. In that version, he deletes the Airbnb profile, calls me difficult, and my mother spends 6 months trying to keep the peace by asking me to be the bigger person. The condo stays in my name, but he finds another arrangement, another angle. Because people who take without asking do not stop when they are caught. They adapt. I chose a different version, not because I am particularly patient by nature, but because I understand something about how consequences actually work. They are not instant. They do not arrive the moment someone deserves them. They build, they accumulate. And if you are willing to be methodical, you can be the person who decides when and how they land. What my brother did was not a moment of weakness or a single bad decision. It was 8 months of deliberate choices, each one building on the last. He moved me out of my own home with a lie. He manufactured a story about mold that did not exist. He listed my condo on a platform, collected the money, and kept going, month after month, because nothing stopped him. That is not impulsiveness. That is a pattern, and patterns require a proportionate response, not a reactive one. I have thought a lot about what it takes to hold yourself together when someone you love is doing something like this. It is not easy to stay quiet when you know. It is not comfortable to keep showing up at Sunday dinners and asking how things are going when you have a spreadsheet open on your laptop at midnight that documents exactly how things are going. But I did it because I knew that the moment I acted on emotion alone, I would hand him the narrative. I would become the unstable sister, the difficult one, the one who overreacted. The file I built was not just evidence, it was my credibility, organized into tabs. And here is what I think the whole thing actually taught me, if I am being honest. The strength was never in the confrontation. The confrontation was the last 10 minutes of an 11-month process. The strength was in every quiet evening I spent documenting instead of reacting. Every time I chose precision over anger. Every time I reminded myself that being right means nothing if you cannot prove it in a room full of people who were not there. My brother is intelligent. He is charming. He had been navigating our family dynamics for 35 years, and he knew exactly which stories people would believe. What he did not account for was that I had spent 4 years in compliance, which is essentially a profession built on the principle that the truth has a paper trail if you know where to look. I am not telling this story to celebrate what happened to him. I do not feel good about where things stand between us. I feel sad about it in a way that does not go away. But I would make the same choices again, because the alternative was to keep being a resource that someone else drew from without asking, and that was not a life I was willing to keep living. If you are in something that feels like this, the most important thing I can tell you is that clarity is not the same as coldness. You can grieve someone and still hold them accountable. You can love a person and still refuse to be harmed by them. Those two things are not opposites. They are just both true at the same time, and learning to carry them both is one of the harder things I have ever done. The condo is quiet tonight. The Ottawa River is out there, doing what it always does. And the mortgage came out of my account this morning, same as always, going towards something that is mine. That is enough.